Nobody knew how long she'd been lying there. The prairie stretched endless, a canvas of ochre and shadow, and the wind whispered secrets through the dry grass. Dust clung to everything. The sun had already dipped below the horizon, leaving the land half bathed in orange, half swallowed by dark. He heard it first as a faint rasp, like someone gasping for life. At first, he thought it a coyote, or a gust caught in the hollows, but then came the words, broken and raw. "Help, I'm dying." Rancher James Calloway had been tending his cattle for decades. He knew the prairie's moods, its sudden violence, its silent dangers, but nothing had prepared him for this. Instinct prickled at his spine. He followed the sound, careful, boots crunching over trampled grass, eyes scanning the dark. There she was, half hidden beneath a tattered blanket, shivering so violently it made the bones ache to watch. Her face was pale, lips cracked, hands trembling. The sight stirred something deep in him, a mixture of empathy, fear, and that stubborn stubbornness that made him keep walking toward danger. "Hey," he said, voice low, steady. "I'm here. You're safe now." Safe. He knew better than to say it aloud. Out here, safe was a promise the land never kept. He knelt, wrapping her fragile body in his coat. The leather smelled of smoke and earth. Every movement revealed signs of struggle. Branches snapped like brittle bones, grass pressed down by heavy boots, footprints carved deep into the soil. Someone had been here, and maybe still was. He lifted her fully, cradling her against his chest. Her eyes flickered open, haunted and pleading. Questions swirled in his mind. Who was she? What had chased her into the prairie? And more importantly, was it gone or was it waiting? The wind shifted. Something unseen rustled behind the trees. A shadow passed where it shouldn't, silent and deliberate. James's heart thieves, imped against his ribs, louder than the cold night around him. And then he lifted the blanket a little further. His face went pale. Because what he saw was not just an injured girl. It was a clue, a mark, something that changed everything. And in that moment, he knew. The danger wasn't past. It was just beginning. Inside the cabin, the fire crackled, painting the walls in flickering gold and shadow. James set her down gently, careful not to jostle the fragile weight of her body. She groaned, a thin, ragged sound, and he saw the truth at once. She was gravely injured. Every breath was shallow, each one a struggle that made his chest tighten. Her arms were a map of violence. Bruises blackened like storm clouds. Cuts carved deep lines into pale flesh. Symbols, strange, jagged, almost ritualistic, were etched across her torso, haunting in their precision. James traced them with his eyes, a chill running through him. Whoever, or whatever, had done this wanted a message left behind. She tried to speak. Words stumbled out like broken glass. They were after me. Wagon. Ambush. Couldn't stop. Her hands twitched, clawing at the air, as if the shadows themselves were reaching for her. James's mind raced. Wagon ambushes weren't unheard of, but the way she said it, the fear that laced each syllable, told him this wasn't ordinary bandits. Something unnatural, something relentless. He couldn't make sense of it yet, but he knew one thing. She was alive, and it was on him to keep her that way. He tore a strip of cloth, dampened it with water from the kettle, and pressed it to a deep gash across her shoulder. The scent of iron hit him. Blood. Hot. Sticky. Her eyes fluttered, voice barely a whisper. They're close. Outside, the prairie had dissolved into night. The wind moaned across empty plains, bending the tall grass like ghostly fingers. A coyote's howl punctured the darkness, less sharp and lonely, and James's ears twitched. Every sound was amplified in the quiet of the cabin, each shadow a potential threat. He kept glancing at the window, heart thudding. He wrapped her in blankets, layering warmth around her trembling form, and tried to piece together her story from the fragments she offered. Each revelation only deepened the mystery. Who had chased her? Why the symbols? What lay beyond the trees waiting to strike? Then it happened. A shadow passed across the cabin window. Not slow, not accidental, smooth, deliberate. Neither she nor James heard footsteps. But there it was, breathing, slow, measured, just outside. And in that moment, the fragile bubble of safety he had built around them shattered. James stood by the window, hands clenched around the sill. Outside, darkness had thickened, swallowing the prairie whole. He debated his options, ride out for help or face the threat here alone. Every instinct screamed caution, but pride, stubbornness, and that old rancher's grit held him firm. She stirred weakly beneath the blankets, eyes half closed, voice barely a whisper. They want it, won't stop. Secret, worth killing for. Her words were jagged, breathless, but loaded with weight. James leaned closer. Whatever she carried, it mattered more than either of them, and that thought tightened the knot in his gut. Flashbacks flickered in her mind, spilling into the cabin like ghostly echoes. Rain lashed her face, wind tearing at her coat. Night storms turned the prairie into a dark, bleeding canvas. Wagons barreled through mud, hooves pounding, the air full of shouting and gunfire. She ran, stumbled, crawled, anything to survive. And now, weeks later, that terror had followed her straight to James's doorstep. He moved silently through the cabin, eyes sweeping every corner, scanning for movement. The barn next door groaned under its own weight, shadows twisting between the beams. She tried to warn him, words fragmented. Quiet. Don't see them. Lanterns, horses. His chest tightened. Footsteps. Faint. Outside. Snow crunch. Ed under careful boots, a rhythm that made his blood hum. A lantern flickered in the distance, swaying like a dying firefly. Horses shifted, impatient, muscles tense. The isolated ranch that once felt like sanctuary now seemed like a trap. James dropped low, hand brushing the rifle by the wall. He felt the weight of responsibility, not just for the woman, but for the secret she carried. Their bond had begun in urgency, but now it was real, protective, fierce. He wouldn't let them take her, not without a fight. Outside, the wind carried voices, low murmurs first, then sharper tones, closer, testing the dark. She whispered, relentless, vengeance, greed, nothing will stop them. James's heart thumped like a hammer. Every shadow in the cabin became a threat, every sound a warning. And then, a horse outside neighed sharply. A man's voice floated faintly, calling into the dark. James's hand tightened on the rifle. This wasn't bandits, not ordinary men. Whatever was coming, it was precise, patient, and deadly. And the night was only beginning. The night shattered. Shadows moved with deadly purpose. Masked figures emerged from the darkness, silent but lethal, circling the cabin like wolves scenting prey. James grabbed the rifle, muscles coiled, senses razor sharp. Every step outside could be their last. The first hammer fell. A window rattled. Shouts tore through the night. He fired, the crack of the rifle slicing the darkness. One intruder dropped, another ducked, returning fire that smashed into the cabin wall. Splinters flew like daggers, and the wind carried the chaos across the prairie. She struggled to her knees, blood streaking her face, but her eyes burned with purpose. "Here! Move the chairs! Barricade the door!" Her voice was weak but forceful. She threw herself into action, blocking entryways, shouting warnings about where the attackers had crept. James felt a surge of respect and fear. She was resourceful, determined, alive in ways that defied her injuries. Gunshots echoed. The cabin trembled under the assault. Every second stretched, each one heavier than the last. James ducked, fired, cursed, and moved with the skill of a man who knew the land, the shadows, the rhythms of violence. Outside, hoofbeats thudded against the earth, lanterns swayed in the distance, their glow cutting slices into the night. And then she spoke, whispering, almost to herself, I'm not just anyone. My father, landowner, betrayed. They want it hidden. I carry proof." James froze. The pieces clicked together. The relentless pursuit, the markings, the fear. This wasn't random. This was vengeance, greed, secrets buried deep enough to kill for. The attackers smashed a side window. Glass rained down, sharp as knives. James grabbed her arm. "Down! Follow me!" He pulled her toward the trap door, hidden beneath the rug, hearts pounding, breaths ragged. They descended into the cellar, darkness swallowing them whole. The air was cold, damp, heavy with fear. Every creak above, every shift of weight sent shivers through their spines. They huddled in the shadows, silent, listening. Then, a sound that made James's stomach drop. A boot. Heavy, deliberate, almost upon them. One of the intruders, unaware, neared the hidden trapdoor. James's grip tightened on the rifle. Her hand found his, trembling. And in that moment, they realized the cellar might not save them, not if one wrong step revealed their hiding place. Time slowed, breath held. James and the woman crouched in the cellar, breaths shallow, hearts hammering. Silence stretched like a taut wire. Then James whispered, "We're not waiting, we move now." She nodded, gripping the evidence tightly, her fingers slick with blood and sweat. They slipped through a hidden passage behind the cabin, a narrow trail he'd carved years ago for emergencies. Moonlight barely touched the ground, revealing roots and rocks that could trip the unwary. The prairie, once tranquil under the stars, had turned into a trap-filled maze. Every shadow felt alive, every gust of wind a potential threat. They moved fast but careful, the woman leaning on Nisty for balance, her weak legs trembling with exhaustion. Footfalls behind them were relentless, their pursuers close, but James knew this land. He ducked behind gullies, vaulted over fallen logs, leading her through secret hollows and mud-laden gullies. The night screamed with the echoes of their flight, hooves pounding, shouts lost in the wind, twigs snapping like tiny alarms. Then came the confrontation. A rider spurred ahead, lantern casting a harsh glare across the mud. James paused, crouched behind a ridge. The man looked certain of victory, but James had patience, instinct, and the terrain on his side. One carefully aimed shot, low, loud, warning that hit harder than a hammer, and the pursuer faltered, tumbling into the gully, cursing and defeated. The woman gasped, but kept moving, clutching her father's papers, the proof of betrayal that had caused so much bloodshed. We made it," she whispered, voice trembling, but eyes bright with fierce relief. James only grunted, his gaze scanning the darkness. Still cautious, still wary. Hours passed, the night stretching thin, until the first rays of dawn broke over the plains. Soft light spilled across the hills, painting everything in gold and pink. The terror of the night felt distant, though the prairie still carried the scent of fear and sweat. They paused, leaning against each other, exhausted but alive. She turned to him, gratitude heavy in her voice. "You saved me. You didn't have to, but you did." James only tipped his hat, a slow smile cracking his rugged face. Words weren't necessary. The bond was understood. Trust forged in fire, courage tested under shadow. They mounted the horses, riding toward the rising sun. Behind them, the world was quiet but full of memory. Survival had demanded everything. Yet hope lingered. Justice would come slowly, but the night had proven that courage, determination, and loyalty could tip the scales against even the deadliest odds. And yet, as they rode, a figure crouched on a distant ridge, watching, silent, patient, waiting, a reminder that the prairie never truly forgives. The wind carried their laughter, their relief, and the whisper of danger that might return.